You may have heard the phrase adaptive teaching a lot in school lately, but what does it actually mean? Often adaptive teaching is confused with differentiation, which means planning and tailoring your lessons with individual children's needs and abilities in mind. However, adaptive teaching is being responsive to information about learning and adjusting teaching to better support the needs of the pupils whilst maintaining high expectations for all. When faced with the class, our main aim as educators is to engage all learners and strive to ensure that every pupil reaches their full potential in the lesson. But how do we meet the needs of a range of abilities in our classrooms? All have varying social backgrounds, diverse interests, different skill sets and levels regarding academic learning. So we really are faced with a challenge. Hi everyone, I'm Natalie from My Progression, and today we're going to look at adaptive teaching. In this video, we're going to explore the concept of adaptive teaching and explain how you can apply this within your classroom. We're also going to delve further into how adaptive teaching is different to differentiation and what adaptive teaching really looks like. If you have prior knowledge and experience of adaptive teaching, we would love to hear from you. Please drop us a comment in the comments box below. And whilst you're there, why not like and subscribe and click on that bell to keep hearing more from My Progression. So what is adaptive teaching? The general perception of adaptive teaching is that it's what all good practitioners do constantly throughout the lesson so that all pupils can access the learning in mainstream classrooms. Even if pupils are sorted into ability sets for a subject, there's always some level of adaptation as there'll be a range of learners within that set. Through planning for different needs and abilities, you're meeting the needs of your pupils, considering both the level of the work you set and the expectations of achievement and progress for that lesson. Teacher Standard 5 states that you should adapt your teaching to respond to the strengths and needs of all pupils. As educators, we do presume this is linked to differentiation and inclusion of pupils in the learning environment, with the teacher planning to ensure that all pupils are engaged and in learning at some level. However, adaptive teaching takes this one step further and involves assessing the strengths and needs of learners throughout all parts of the lesson. From this, you can adapt the pedagogy accordingly through a range of methods. For example, you might provide different levels of support using different resources or adjusting the pace and number of instructions. Okay, I know you're probably thinking, yes, I agree, and this is what I already do. Well, that's great. This is what we do as educators, but somewhat unintentionally or naturally. Therefore, adaptive teaching is being more intentional and conscious about our teaching and the different children that we teach. Now let's explore how adaptive teaching differs from differentiation. Differentiation, as you know, is setting work at various levels to ensure all pupils can access the learning. When using differentiation, we tailor the lessons, resources or tasks to suit the individual learner. Now, if you want more on this, then check out our video on differentiation, linked in the description below. However, a question to challenge your thinking. In differentiating, are we putting limits on the expectations of some children? Are we saying they're working below the expected level and therefore they can't access the work? Are we putting a ceiling on their expectations? Creating different worksheets or tasks for specific pupils could stunt their progress, and as educators we should ensure that every child has an equal opportunity to reach the same goal. Having preconceptions of a pupil's ability could also lead them to putting a ceiling on themselves and adopting a fixed mindset towards that topic. Positive learning experiences are vital to encourage a pupil to challenge themselves to move out of their comfort zone in order to learn more. Where differentiation will use different worksheets based on children's ability, adaptive teaching would include pre-prepared scaffolded sheets that remove the barrier to learning. Differentiation would be to plan different questions for children of varying abilities. Adaptive teaching would be where you ask everyone the same question but consider ways to scaffold, like giving them options. You'll likely use attainment to support differentiation, whereas with adaptive teaching, you'll be reflective within the lesson. You'll be aware of previous attainment, but won't put a ceiling on progress. You'll usually be consistent with differentiation, ensuring it's purposeful, but with adaptive teaching, you're constantly reflecting and changing. You won't stick to something that's not working. Differentiation, you change content, but with adaptive teaching, you'll give everyone the same content, but adapt the resources used. With differentiation, you'd change the setup of the classroom itself, but adaptive teaching would focus on moving the children around. The children are at the heart of what you do in both, and knowing your class is essential, but adaptive teaching doesn't limit that potential. Differentiation will put children into groups, whereas adaptive teaching will avoid grouping to give opportunities to all. Adaptive teaching as a theory describes a lot of the practices that are already happening in your classrooms. Examples of this include reteaching content that hasn't been fully understood, or even pre-teaching a topic you know your class will struggle with. Within the classroom, using flexible groupings, pre-preparing scaffolded resources, and being responsive to how pupils are learning are all great examples of adaptive teaching. For example, have you ever planned and taught a lesson that's been a huge success? The pupils responded well, they got a huge amount from the lesson, and you thought you'd keep that lesson to teach again in the future. That day arrives, and this time, the lesson falls flat. The response is completely opposite to that of the previous year or class. It's disappointing and a little confusing. You've changed very little and felt confident. So what went wrong? The pupils you teach need to be at the heart of your planning. In a situation like this, we've regurgitated previous planning without considering the pupils we teach and their learning needs. If something falls flat, we as educators need to adapt our teaching. The style, the tasks, the dynamics, or how the content, which is often non-negotiable, is taught, delivered, and learned. In a classroom, we use facts and figures of assessment data to assess the pupil's understanding. However, in adaptive teaching, we're being reactive and responsive to pupils' needs before, during, and after the lesson. Always being reflective of how it went and what we could change to further the learning. So what does adaptive teaching look like in the classroom? There are many different ways to make sure you have an adaptive classroom that caters to all of your students. So let's take a look at some of those methods now. Adaptive teaching is about knowing when and how to differentiate appropriately and being flexible to know when to push learning forward and not put limits on children's learning. When teaching, have the confidence to recognise when a topic is being understood or if it needs reteaching in a different way. Deviating from that lesson plan is fine. The main goal is that all pupils get it. An adaptive classroom will have personalisation, differentiation and flexibility. There'll be an ongoing assessment for learning, AFL, along with collaboration and self-directed learning too. Pupils will feel empowered, like they can reach for the stars. Great teacher-pupil relationships are built in adaptive classrooms because communication is key. As a teacher, you get to know your pupils and their individual learning styles. You'll also have a clear view of their needs and your pupils, including those with SEND or EAL. It's easy to spot a teacher who uses adaptive teaching because their classroom is full of scaffolding and modelling to support pupils in their understanding. Some schools refer to modelling as WAGGLES, which stands for what a good one looks like. The pupils are then confident and supported to carry out the task if they have that visual example of what's expected of them. For example, in maths, have the equipment out on the table as an option for those pupils that want to use Unifix cubes, Dines blocks, or place value charts to support their learning. The point is that there's an option to break down that barrier to learning and support them in achieving the objective however they learn. All resources must be effective with visual prompts and the effective use of a range of ICT. Projects, classroom discussion, and cooperative learning are all methods that encourage an adaptive classroom. This may take some effort and may even require you to change your classroom setup from time to time, but the benefit will be that the classroom is an exciting place to be for both the teacher and pupils, and you'll reap the rewards. For example, many teachers find that debates improve participation for all, as pupils can share their ideas without being limited to writing. And this helps you as the teacher monitor their understanding through verbal discussion and takes away the written barrier. Overall, it's all about knowing your class, their learning styles, and how you can make their classroom environment the best for learning so that all can achieve. Will adaptive teaching make a difference in your classroom? Well, after exploring what adaptive teaching is and what it looks like, it's clear that it simply encompasses all of what teachers do well. As practitioners, it's our responsibility to provide equal learning experiences to all. We should never put a ceiling on our expectations of pupils' learning. We need to lift them to new and higher levels of attainment through creative, inclusive, and personalised teaching strategies, constantly evaluating and adapting to meet each child's needs. This will make a difference within your classroom, and after all, that's why we chose to be educators, to have the power to make a difference. Now, I appreciate that some constraints within a school may be a barrier to the amount that you can adapt your lessons, but we'd love to hear how you feel about this topic and what works well in your classroom and for you as a practitioner. If our pupils can't learn the way that we teach, we must teach in the way that they learn. I've been Natalie from My Progression, and let's keep your career in motion.